Now, I keep on mentioning that the parathyroid hormone acts on three parts of the body. Now, these three parts basically possess the parathyroid hormone receptors. Those are also known as PTHRs. They detect this parathyroid hormone and result in the resulting mechanisms. Now, there are three types of these receptors, which are the G protein coupled receptors. They're named as PTHR1, PTHR2, and PTHR3. Now, the first one, or the PTHR1, is physiologically more important than the other two. So you have to keep this in mind. Now, on the target cells of the bone, kidney, and the gastrointestinal tract, the parathyroid hormone binds with PTHR1 and forms the hormone receptor complex. This hormone receptor complex results in the formation of cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Now, this acts as a second messenger for this hormone. Now, this activates multiple pathways that play a part in the regulation of calcium. Along with increasing the calcium levels, the parathyroid hormone also plays a minor role in decreasing the phosphate levels as well. Now, this reduction of phosphate in our blood is important because when phosphate levels are high, the calcium forms a complex with the phosphate, making calcium phosphate. Now, these conditions are unfavorable because we need to increase the calcium level. So, at a glance, the parathyroid hormone will increase the calcium level and decrease the phosphate level to stop this complex from forming in the blood. So let's zoom in to each of these parts and see which pathways are causing this regulation in the calcium and phosphate levels. Now, a few things are happening here in the bone. First off, the parathyroid hormone activates the breakdown of the bone. And secondly, it increases the permeability of the bone cells to release the calcium ions. Now, both of these things will result in the increase of calcium in our blood. Now, this resorption of calcium from the bone occurs in two phases, the rapid phase and the slow phase. The rapid phase occurs within minutes after the release of parathyroid hormone from the parathyroid glands. Immediately after reaching the bone, the parathyroid hormone gets attached with the receptors on the cell membrane of osteoblasts and osteocytes. The hormone receptor complex increases the permeability of membranes of these cells for calcium ions. This accelerates the calcium pump mechanism so that the calcium ions move out of these bone cells and enter the blood at a faster rate. Now, the slow phase of calcium sorption from the bone is due to the activation of osteoclasts by the parathyroid hormone. When osteoclasts are activated, some substances such as proteolytic enzymes, citric acid, and lactic acid are released from the lysozymes of these cells. All of these substances digest or dissolve the organic matrix of the bone, thus releasing the calcium ions. Now, these calcium ions slowly enter the blood. Now, along with the calcium resorption, the parathyroid hormone also increases the phosphate absorption from the bones. So now in the kidneys, the parathormone will do two things. Firstly, it will increase the calcium reabsorption, and secondly, it will decrease the phosphate reabsorption, which means that the more phosphate will be excreted in the urine. The parathormone increases the calcium reabsorption mainly from the distal convoluted tubules and the proximal part of the collecting duct. So it returns back to the systemic circulation, thus increasing the calcium ions in the blood. Now remember, I told you that the parathormone increases the phosphate excretion. It does so through the phosphaturic action. Let's see what that is. Now, the phosphaturic action is the effect of the parathormone by acting mainly on the proximal convoluted tubule of the renal tubules. Over here, it inhibits the phosphate reabsorption, so it gets excreted through the urine. In the kidneys, the parathormone also increases the formation of vitamin D from the pre-hormone 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. Now, the role of this vitamin D is to increase the calcium absorption at the bones. Thus, the low calcium levels will be increased in the blood. Now, this vitamin D that is formed in the kidneys will not only act on the bones, it will also act on our gastrointestinal tract. Here, it will increase the absorption of calcium and phosphate, which in turn will enter the blood, thus increasing its blood concentration. So, what is happening as a result of parathormone? It is activating vitamin D, which in turn will increase the calcium in the blood. So at a glance, what is overall happening? Let's see. Now, the low levels of calcium in the blood will be detected by the calcium sensing receptors on the parathyroid gland chief cells. This will result in the secretion of parathormone. Now, if you recall, this parathormone will act on three parts of our body, which were our bones, our kidneys, and our gastrointestinal tract. On the bones, it will basically activate the osteoclasts and increase the bone sorption. At the same time, the membrane permeability for the calcium will be increased. Both of these things will result in the release of calcium to the blood. Along with that, the phosphate will be reabsorbed into the bone. Now, in the kidneys, three things are happening. First of all, the calcium reabsorption will be increased, which means that it will enter the blood. The phosphate reabsorption will decrease, which means that it will be excreted out through the urine. And vitamin D will be activated, which will act on our bone and on our GI tract. Now, on our GI tract, what is happening is that as a result of this vitamin D that was produced in our kidneys and as a direct effect of the parathormone, the calcium and phosphate absorption will increase by the intestinal epithelial cells. Now, both of these things will result in the increase of calcium concentration again in the blood. Now, you can see how all of these things are happening as a result of the parathormone. Why? Just to increase the calcium levels in our blood, to bring it back to normal so that our body is able to function properly. This is how the parathormone works is magic. Now let's look at its regulation in the next section.